So this is gonna be a build kind of geared toward newer flyers or newer to fiberglass flyers. Just kind of how I do it. There's several ways to put one together. Everybody's kind of got their own way, but I kind of took tips and tricks from several people and kind of made it my own way. But when you get your kit, it'll be in a box, something like this. This is a Mach 1 kit from the previous owner, but pretty much everybody sends them in a box like this. And the first thing you want to do is get your kit out, get it all out of the package and make sure everything's there. Mach 1 sends a 6 to 8 foot Kevlar. If you have a 2-piece body tube, they're going to send you 3 eye bolts, 6 flat washers, 3 block washers, a set of 1010 rail buttons for 54mm and above. If you order smaller than that, they'll send you smaller rail buttons. An inside diameter bulkhead and some stepped bulkheads, your forward fins, your rear fins, centering rings depending on how many fins you have, nose cone, fiberglass with a aluminum tip, and it screws into the nose cone, fiberglass coupler for the nose cone, body coupler, your payload tube, your main body tube, and your motor tube. And I forgot to mention, if you ordered your kit with graphics, or if your kit comes with graphics, make sure they're in there too. Some people like to wash their fiberglass first thing with warm soapy water, but I like to do all my prep work and then wash them first, or wash them after. But what you gotta do is, building with fiberglass, you're gonna use a 2-part epoxy, 30-minute 2-part epoxy, or JB weld, not the quick weld. You're gonna want the long set normal JB weld, but it's not gonna stick to the fiberglass because it's just slick. So you want to get some good score marks in there. And people will tell you don't put score marks in there because you're gonna scratch and damage the fiberglass windings. Well, guess what? You see these slots on the tube? Those windings are already cut. So you're not gonna do any more damage than already done. And you're filling those scratches back up with your JB weld, and that JB weld or your 2-part epoxy needs something to grab onto, and those score marks are going to grab onto those fibers and those score marks, and it's gonna hold versus having a slick edge to grab onto. So it doesn't matter what you start with, whether you scratch the side of your rings or your fins. So I'll show you scratching a fin. Actually, probably want to start with your motor tube. So to do your motor tube, grab your pencil. So I like to take my motor tube with my booster tube and line it up flush. unless you have a rocket that specifically has your motor tube sticking out of the end. But for this one, it lines up flush with the end. And I'm going to mark on here the very edge of each slot. Like that. And I'm going to take one of my centering rings, make sure it's straight across as possible, it's not tilted one way or the other, and draw you a circle all the way around. And then slide it down to your next mark and keep doing the same thing for all 4 lines, or 2 lines if you have a motor tube with just 2 centering rings. This is where the fun begins. You need a X-Acto knife or some kind of razor blade or sharp file, and you want to cut a cross pattern It doesn't have to be pretty, just some kind of jagged pattern up to each line. And you want to make like a hatch pattern, so make some slanted lines going one way and then turn your piece so you make some slanted lines going the other way. Now this is your fin tab, this piece that sticks down. So you want to stick that down in there roughly till you get there, and you want to make a mark. You can do it with a pencil or your knife. And you want to make the same kind of score mark all along there on both sides, on all of your fins. So just about 5-10 minutes of scratching away, you get that. You can see I started off good, and then my hand gets tired after a while. And it doesn't have to be pretty, you just score it up however you want with a sharp knife or file. When you get done with this, scratch the sides of your centering ring. Be careful, be careful. Just little score marks, they don't have to be as detailed as that one. And then I'll show you that, and then we'll move on to the slots on your booster tube. The inside and outside of these slots also need to be scratched. And obviously your knife can't get all the way up here, so you need some kind of dowel rod or stick, and I don't have a dowel rod the right size, so I'm just using a piece of stiff plywood that I had laying around. And you can use a nail, and I just drill a little hole just so the wood doesn't split. Nail on your dowel rod, make sure your stick or rod is long enough to get all the way up in there. And again, it doesn't have to be pretty. But just make sure you got some scratches. And you might need to nip the end to make it sharp. it does take a little bit to get the scratches going, but you'll be able to see through the thin wall, and that's the nice thing about Mach 1's tube, is it's kind of clear so you can see what you got going on in there. Can you see the whites? If you see through the tube, you can see all the white scratches. That's, I mean, it's not pretty, it doesn't have to be. It just gives something for the whatever adhesive you're using, be it 2-part epoxy or whatever you're using, to have something to grab onto. But that's essentially what you're looking for. The next step in all this, I'm trying to get a good view for you guys, is to make sure all these rings fit your motor tube. The motor ring, the centering ring with the notch, is going to go in a certain spot. It's going to go on the furthest inner mark. So this is the mark that lines up with the bottom of the tube. Your notch is going to go with the mark that lines up at the top. And then the other three, it doesn't matter. But they all need to fit the same. Mine all fit pretty good. And you can tack them in place with super glue. File them down. And I like to use a flat file. I just use this little small one. You can use a big one. You can use one like this. You just want to mark where the fins are going to be on your motor tube. Because your fins are going to go through the slot and they're going to make contact with the motor tube. So you want to mark each fin slot on your motor tube. And this is just the easiest way for me to do it. I don't have to mess with a fin slot or nothing like that. Trying to get the camera to focus. You can see each fin line. And then, guess what you get to do? Scratching. Just make that same crosshatch pattern. If you haven't watched Tim Van Milligan's videos, the gentleman that owns Apogee Rockets, you can learn a lot of stuff from him about cardboard and wood rockets. His build videos are pretty good. Okay, so before we permanently glue everything in place, we need to break that little bit of super glue we held our rings on, the notched ring. We need to break that little dot of super glue, and we need to feed your shock cord through that ring and put the ring back on the tube. And you also want to make sure that it's not covering one of your fin lines. You want it in between two of your fin lines. Mix up some 30-minute epoxy, and on the outside of every ring we're going to make a fillet. A fillet is just a bead all the way around the outside of each ring and in the middle of these two rings. I've already got some mixed up, so I'm going to put it around the outside of this ring. I'm going to go ahead and start working on this nose cone, but we need to smooth it out. And you can leave the aluminum nose cone aluminum, and it's pretty well polished, or you can paint it. And on this one, to stick with the theme, I think I'm going to paint it. So I'm not too worried about scratching it up a little bit. I'm going to take the tip off. So you need a Phillips head screwdriver. That just unscrews. The bolt comes out. And the washer's probably stuck. So you just punch that out. And I like to keep everything together. So I just screw the screw back in. And I'm going to put that in the bag. And we're going to sand this baby smooth. And just start sanding till it's smooth. And then after I get it pretty smooth, we might have to fill the holes, if there's any. And I'll show you how to do that when I'm done. And we got it sanded to 120, so all the scratches going this way are out. I'm going to hit it with 220 and then go up to 320. Alright, so I've got it sanded down. I'm going to take my mask off. Alright, so I've got it sanded down. Get it zoomed in to 320. And I've still got some pits here. I opened up a little pit there. And down here there's a bunch of little... They were micro dots, but they're mostly filled in. There's one or two that I'll have to fill in. Normally, I would use Bondo spot putty. I don't know what I did with it. I haven't built the rocket in so long. Kind of put rocketry off to the side for a while. I'm just going to use a couple dabs of 30-minute epoxy. I'm just going to fill it with this, because
It's cheap and it's what I have. And the holes are so small, it's not going to affect anything. So for our nose cone bulkhead, you can glue it in first, or you can drill for the eye bolt first. I've already prepped for the eye bolt. In this case, the eye bolt's a 5/16. Going to take a 5/16 hole. So there's already a center hole drilled in by the CNC, and I've got little holes in my bench here. Because now that we've done all that sanding, our tip's not going to fit right. And you can see right here, well, maybe you can't see, but if I hold this and turn it, there's a little lip right here. So that means we've sanded our end of our nose cone past the point that the tip fits. So we'll take our 100 and we'll lay it flat. And we're going to take our nose cone and just keep it as flat as possible. So the tip is fitting the nose cone. So we're gonna drop that back in there. Make sure the washer, try to get the washer as straight as possible. If the washer's in there too crooked, your nose cone tip, the tip, is gonna go in crooked. It may not seat properly. So I like to get the washer as flat as possible on the inside. When the lock washer tightens, if the flat washer's not flat, when you go to tighten down in the lock washer, if this flat washer, the big one, is not as straight as possible, it's tilted, and you go to tighten the screw down all the way, that screw is going to want to tilt one way or the other depending on how the washer is, and it's going to depending on how loose the fit is on the tip on the inside, it'll pull that tip to the side and it won't fit around very well. But we got a pretty good fit there. So on to the next piece is this. Earlier I made the mistake of saying that you want this flush with the bottom of this, but you don't. You want a little bit of a lip. You see back here there's a little bit of a lip. About to show you why right now. I got the camera facing the other way. We're gonna make a little epoxy fillet. We made the big one on the inside. It's cured now. Don't need much. Probably needed more than that. And you want to make a fillet all the way around. And bring it up flush with the lip of the coupler. The reason I'm doing such an in-depth build is, you know, the other channels that do rocket builds, you know, they're good. I like them, but they're rocket specific and they don't go over a whole lot of detail. And you know, once you get that detail, you don't really need to go over it again. I'm short just a little tiny bit. Sure. Oh yeah, I got plenty around here that I don't need spread out. I'm gonna mix up some more. And they're just, you know, there's a lot to cover in building a rocket. And I just haven't seen too many in-depth build videos on fiberglass rockets. There's a lot of them out there on wood rockets. I haven't seen too many of them on fiberglass. And there's so many different techniques on fiberglass and different glues to use. It's almost insane. Some people probably gonna yell at me for using my bare finger to spread this around. Like I said, this stuff doesn't bother my skin. If you have sensitive skin, use nitrile gloves, vitrile gloves. I don't know what the difference is. I just know one spilled with an N and one spilled with a V. And now I just use the alcohol wipe to clean my fingers off.